discussing financials with business owners.
Okay. All right. And Dan, what's your objective right now? Like what's important about learning these kind of numbers and philosophies? What's important about that?
Basically the same thing in most of my engagements with clients, both from the implementations to the more extensive implementations and working within them. Even my conversations where I was working with what's his name from Texas? Why can't I remember his name?
TJ.
TJ.
Uh-huh.
Is when we got into the concept of working with inside ConnectWise and the financial components within ConnectWise, helping him understand the value of it, and also when having conversations between him and Scott and I, that became a little bit more tenuous for me, being able to talk to somebody who's an accountant and tried to give them the value of ConnectWise and the stuff in the GL having a lot more of equivalencies. So TJ can look at it from an operations standpoint, accountant can look at it from an accounting standpoint, so they can both talk the same language. Instead of TJ saying, hey, I need a report from you on X, Y, and Z, and then he gets back a spit out report from QuickBooks, which really doesn't necessarily always give you what you need. Or TJ trying to explain to Scott, these are the things I need and this is what I want to look like. Because Scott never wanted to change the format of the back end. Right. So I don't know if that's changed. Hopefully it has, because it was trying desperately to get Scott convinced that it would be a better relationship between the two of them on the financials.
Right.
Essentially the only thing that, not the only thing that TJ would receive, but oftentimes he would receive from Scott is, well, we're profitable, we're not profitable. And not really specifics on where the profitability is. In fact, a lot of the work that we did, just going by the numbers we did have, we were digging up where the profit issues, or I should say the loss issues or the expense issues, were making it more difficult for him to, achieve that a consistent profitability. Discussing salary ranges, things like that, why his agreements should have been broken out by line item so he can see where things are at, why labor shouldn't really be bundled with the actual like software service components of their managed services. All of those go back into those fundamentals. This is why. So you know where you're making money, you know where you're losing money, and you make adjustments accordingly instead of just guessing. Because the answer I used to see in the early days of my last company was, oh, let's raise prices. Because we're not seeing the bottom lines dropping in numbers and percentages. So just raise prices on labor with no real digging into do we really need to raise labor prices, or do we need to raise the cost of our licensing, or do we need to do something else?
Right.
And for him, it was even more interesting because they had a lot of expenses for travel, because they're dispersed all over Texas, and I think they had Louisiana and a few other places they had people. So lots of travel expenses and things like that were, in their eyes, part of the costs, like kind of just blended in.
Okay. Man, that's why my answer was half-ass.
Well, I appreciate the kind of drawing it to a client experience that you've had, Dan. I think that's always good to kind of say how could that have looked different if I felt more comfortable with some of these numbers. So that's helpful. So I guess my first question to either one of you would be, where are you at today? Like, do you feel like, a 10 would be, the smartest guy in the world that can talk any financial with anyone? A 1 would be first day on the job. Where would you put yourself today?
2 or 3.
Say again, Ben?
2 or 3.
2 or 3?
I'd probably put myself 1 or 2 at the max, only because it's been a while since I've had those discussions, and mine are less technical in the financial side and more real world, why you want to know these things.
It's like
Okay.
anything,
Not
not
necessarily
using it, you're
computing.
losing it.
Say that again, Ben.
It's just like anything. If you're not using it, you're losing it.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
I
It's a very perishable knowledge base, and you've got how many years of doing it, Josh? And I have limited it at the Barry McKinley way.
Yeah, and I'll tell you both, and I'm recording this, so it's something that hopefully other people will be watching at some point. I like to make this point early on in any training with this is I'm not particularly smart. If you start talking to me about financials outside of this realm, I get lost pretty quick. There's a lot of words I don't understand, a lot of concepts I don't understand. But in 2003, 2004, I took everything that you and I are going to do today and the stuff that Ben and I did before, and all it was just rote practice, like a little kid writing the alphabet over and over and over and over again. So that is your kind of, for me, that was the technique that worked the best, was to say, how do these numbers play together, and just write them and write them and write them. And then I remember graduating to, I wonder if I can make a spreadsheet. I wonder if I can make a spreadsheet that answered a question about how these numbers interact with each other. It sounds nerdy right now, and it kind of was, but it was about 8 hours of doing nothing but that, and it locked in. So for whatever that's worth to you, the way I learned them was just playing with them intensely, because just like you're describing with TJ and Scott, it's, I don't like to be embarrassed, and I don't like to have an answer. And so that was kind of what motivated me to like really drive through them as well. So I had made some really cool notes with Ben, and I can't seem to find those right now, but I've made some additional notes over the course of the last few months, and I thought we'd kind of start there. All right, so we're just going to kind of dive right in, and I'm probably just going to like write stuff on Word documents and just have all sorts of kind of goofy stuff for us to look at. So I'm just going to I'm going to make myself a little text box right here, and I'm going to send this to you guys as well.
Yeah, can you put it in Teams under create a file for it under Teams?
I could. Are you suggesting I do that right now?
Oh, whatever. No, at your leisure, whenever you want to.
Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely do that.
Under our internal wiki or whatever.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
And not quite sure what I have access to in Teams at this point.
In Teams. Okay. Well, I'll get you squared away on Teams then as well. We've made a lot of interesting progress in that.
Yeah, maybe BMK training.
Yeah. I think that's in there, right?
Yeah.
There's a channel called that. But yeah. Okay. Yep. Excellent. Okay. So let's start. And Ben, I'm going to put you on the spot just a little bit, because there was a couple things that when you and I worked through them, I remember kind of thinking, oh, that really resonated. So Ben, do you remember what we identified, you and I identified, as the two types of revenue in our clients' worlds?
Project and service.
Close.
Product.
Yeah, right. Product and service. Okay. And do you remember the two types of cost of goods sold?
Two types of cost of goods sold. Labor. No.
It's a little bit of a trick question.
Two types of, yeah, I've done a bit of a brain dump on the stuff we were.
No problem. So I'm gonna hold off on typing that in, but let's come back to a really important concept of some definitions of a few things. So let's go here. And anyone know the dictionary definition of gross profit?
Revenue minus cost.
That's right, revenue.
Revenue minus cost. That makes sense.
Cost of goods sold.
And then gross revenue would just be all the money you brought in.
There you go. That's right. Yeah. So gross profit equals revenue minus cost of goods sold. This is such a basic concept, that can really screw you up if you don't remember this basic concept. So what would the definition of net profit be, do you think?
Was it EBITDA?
That's synonymous with net profit, absolutely. It would be gross profit minus expenses. All right.
Now,
so
would that be all expenses, including taxes, all that stuff, the full
it would
EBITDA?
be okay. So we're gonna dig into that here in a minute as well. Let's take it as, so you guys both have some really intense hobbies. Ben, you're a master of jujitsu. Dan, you're a scuba diving expert, and you love motorcycles and you know welding. There's some things in your hobbies, in your passions, that I don't know anything about, and I might use language incorrectly. And as a recreational, guy who does these hobbies, it may not drive you nuts. It may not make a difference. If you were a jujitsu instructor, if you were a scuba diver instructor, there'd be a few things that you'd say, it really matters that you know the difference between that subtlety. Casual people use these words interchangeably, but since I'm an instructor of this thing, I can't allow those words to be used interchangeably. And for us, we can't use the words cost of goods sold and expenses interchangeably. Because if we do, we screw up that formula right there. Your clients will use those words interchangeably. And that will really mess up their ability to learn and conceptualize alongside you. So if we say there's two types of revenue, product and service, based on that formula, what are the two types of cost of goods sold? Product and service, right?
Product and services. It's anything that they would put on an invoice.
That's right. So I'm going to mix it up here a little bit and say, in our world, there's two types of expenses. Actually, before we do that, let's do two types of gross profit. What would those two types of gross profit be?
Well, gross profit is revenue minus cost of goods sold, so product and service.
You got it. You got it.
God, it's like a riddle.
It is like a little bit of a riddle. So we do this because we do it this way because what we understand is the cost of goods sold for products is different than the cost of goods sold for services. We have to know, what is your gross profit on product? What is your gross profit on service? Right? So now let's kind of tease it up a little bit here. There are two types of expenses in our clients' worlds. And those are sales expenses and G, general and administrative expenses.
So would that be operational?
Well, that word operational is a great word. We don't use it a lot, but I think in the phrase that in the way you mean them, I think I'd say yes. Rent, utilities, postage, subscriptions, office lunches, all that kind of stuff. Yes. Right. So if we believe that there's two types of revenues, two types of COGS, two types of gross profits, and we believe there's two types of sales expenses, so far you only have to keep track of 8 things, right? 2, 2, 2, that's 6, 8. All you need is 8 numbers, and the rest is math and formulas. Okay, so all you have to do for rote memorization is say 2 types of revenue, 2 types of COGS, 2 types of gross profit, 2 types of expenses. If you can collect that information, we can synthesize it and tell them how their business is running. Let's stay at this really top level of the 2 types of revenue. All right, let me get this down here. Can you see this screen okay, or is it really small?
Really small.
Okay.
Actually, if you take, if you look at the top of your Zoom menu, which is cool, they added this under options. They've added more options. You've got some Zoom control and Zoom ratio. So
Oh,
you can bring them up.
Oh yeah.
So how do I, okay, I've got, so mine say mute, stop video, manage participant polls, new share, pause share, annotate, remote control, more.
Yeah, you've got a lot more. There's at the first in the view options is zoom ratio. You open that up and you can go fit to window 50%, 100%, 150, 200, 300. So you've got that extra long display that shrinks everything down on the display.
I can zoom in on my end, so I'm looking at increased version already.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, I don't know if you can, Josh, because you're stuck as the host. So
Yeah.
whatever you see is what you see.
I'm good.
Okay, cool. All right.
Pretty cool.
So let's stay at this top level. One of the first things that we try to understand from a client, if you meet a guy, and let's just say he's the douchiest douchebag owner you've ever met. Just picture this guy. And he comes in, chest puffed out, and you say, "Hey, dude, how big are you guys?" And he says, 5 million in revenue. If you want to burst his bubble, or if you want to understand why he may not be as great as he's acting like he is, what's one of the first questions you could ask him about that revenue?
How'd you make it?
And what is it?
What was your net profit or what was your EBITDA?
Great. Love it. And
how did you make it?
How did you make it? Absolutely. I might also ask him, great, that's awesome, man. How much of that is product and how much of that is service?
Mm-hmm.
Why might I ask him that?
Because he probably doesn't know.
A, he probably doesn't know. And B, because what would you think has a greater gross profit, product or service?
Service.
Absolutely. So
nowadays, yeah, service.
All right. So if he tells you, yeah, nowadays, right, Dan? Yeah. If he says my ratio is product is 50% and service is 50%, you would then want to kind of dig in a little bit and say, all right, servos. You would then want to know, what's your gross profit on product? And I'll tell you, I ask this question so many times when I'm feeling self-conscious or nervous or when I'm giving a presentation. This is my way to get everybody on track, looking at me like, okay, he knows something I don't know. So what I'll do with a room of people is I'll say, hey, what's your ratio? And most people will take some guesses. And they'll say, oh, we're about 30% product, 70% service, 20% product, 80% service. They'll throw some numbers out that are pretty close. I'll then ask a crowd of people, hey, what's your GP on product? And people will not mess around. They think they know. 25%, 22%, 13%, 8%. You can't make money on product. They're gonna give these very specific numbers. They're not gonna say 10, 20, 30, 40. They're gonna say 18, 14, 12, 13, 22. Okay? They kind of know, or they think they know. And then I'll say outstanding. So 30% of your revenue comes from product, and it's at 14%. What's your service gross profit? And one guy, maybe two out of 50 or 60 people in the room will say 53%, right? And they'll raise their hand and they'll know it. Everyone else is sitting there with their jaw slung open and has no idea. Then I'll say, okay, so 70% of your revenue, you don't know the gross profit from. 30% you do, but the 70% you don't. So you start hammering this issue home that you don't know anything about your business if you don't know your service gross profit. You don't know if your guys are efficient or effective. You don't know if you priced it well. You don't know if you're paying too much. You don't know if you can afford to hire another tech. You know nothing. And I don't mean that like in a you're dumb. It just means don't beat yourself up for not knowing what to do because you haven't been shown this.
And that's why they're in the room.
That's why they're in the room. Absolutely. Right. So we'll get them there. So we got to take this piece right here and say, I need mastery of this. I need to really understand this. I need to know the two types of product, the two types of COGS, two types of gross profit. I need to know my ratio. So the most common ratio that we see with our clients is between a 70-30 and a 20-80. The smaller percentage being the product, the larger being the service. All right. So here's where things get really interesting. Let's say we've got a $1 million MSP, which is kind of the most common size that we work with year after year. And we say they're a 30% product and a 70% service. My question to you guys is, how many gross dollars, top line dollars, are they bringing in product?
300,000.
Perfect, exactly. And how many dollars are they bringing in service?
7.
Dan, you follow that?
So it's a just decimal point move.
What's that?
Drop the percentage and throw in the. It's just a fraction.
That's all it is. Yeah. In your head, all you did was you said 0.30 times 1 million, and then you did 0.70 times 1 million, or you did 0.30 times a million, and then you subtracted the 300,000 from the million, and you got 700,000.
Anybody want a Twizzler?
What's that?
Did anybody want a Twizzler?
We are not a Barry McKinley is not a Twizzler house. Barry McKinley is a red vine house, Ben. This is a fucking problem.
I would like a Dove almond and
This is the house of Diet Coke and red vines. All right.
house of Kolachkis.
So now we know a top line thing that they may not know. You can do this. This exercise right here is knowing how to put on your scuba equipment. You may not know how to use it. You may not know how to be very good at it. This is you know how to tie your jujitsu belt correctly, Ben. Being able to do this gets you a little bit of street cred on the beach or in the gym. Like, okay, he's not totally lost in this. So whenever you're working with a client, your first step is to understand this ratio. All right. So always get to the core of this, whether you have to do it on your own with one of their P&Ls or whether you work through it with them, in a training environment, get this number. Because you can safely assume that their service GP is higher than their product GP. You don't need to know a whole lot about their company. You can make that assumption. But now we got to say, well, what is your GP on those two items? So for the product, I'm going to tell you that they have a 15% GP. And for the service, I'm going to tell you they've got a 60% GP. How many gross profit dollars do they have in product?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Calculator.
45,000.
How much, Ben?
Yeah, 45,000.
That's exactly right. All right. So what was their cost of goods sold on the product?
45. 299,955.
How much?
No, never mind. Sorry. 255.
Exactly. All right. So bingo, you got it now. What was their gross profit on service?
420.
Dan, how did he get 420?
%60 times 7,000.
Bingo. And it was 420, you say?
Yep.
So what were their COGS?
280. I think it's un-American to not be a Twizzler house.
No, man, that's crazy. I'll get your mind right. Don't worry. All right.
It's un-American not to have a gun.
That too.
All right. So now we've got some interesting things going on. We know their revenue. We know their revenue ratio. We know the GP on both those lines of revenue. We got to do something crazy here now. All right. I want to now know, what is their overall gross profit for the business?
Overall gross profit. Gonna be one of those freaking add them up, divide, and then times by freaking.
No, the overall is 420 plus 45.
All right. So their overall gross profit is how much?
45,000 plus 420,000.
465,000.
Yes.
Okay. So gross profit, the word gross profit means a raw dollar amount. I use it interchangeably. Now let's look for overall gross profit margin. How do I get that?
Gross profit margin. So is that 1 million minus 465,000? Or percentage? That's find the percentage of that. 465,000 divided by 1 million.
Bingo. Exactly. All right. Which is what? Oh, come on. That's simple math.
Oh, that's not simple. There's no such thing as simple math for Dan.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. That's his 46.
I leave that for my wife.
46%.
Yeah, 46.5%.
She's the banker. She's the finance
person. All right. So now, right here, in this 5-6 minutes or 10 minutes we've taken to do this, we know the story of their business. I know so much about this right now, about whatever this company is. This 46.5%, this is, just so you guys know, this is a Baring McKinley original. No one in our industry is talking about this. I've been playing with it and thinking about it for 8 years. Only this year did I really start driving this point home with our clients. Okay, so if we think of that P&L going from top to bottom, we got the revenue, the cost of goods sold, the gross profit. Once we hit that gross profit line, it's like a thick, thick line. This is the last place that we earn money, that we have money, that the money's there. We've paid for our cost of goods sold to deliver it. We paid for the cost of goods sold to buy the product. That $465,000, that's our money. Anything below that thick line now is expenses. And what are the two types of expenses?
Sales.
And
administrative and general.
General administrative. Okay. So the top part of the P&L that gets us to gross profit, bam, story's over. Whatever you have here is all you can spend on sales expenses and G&A. Spend wisely, boys. Right? So if we kind of think about those sales expenses, I'll ask you, just kind of your opinion based on your years of experience in the industry. if I made the following statement, how would you answer? Most MSPs have high sales expenses, low sales expenses, or no sales expenses. What one would be your experience?
No.
Do you want to clarify size of MSP?
Let's use this $1 million.
Okay, none.
Okay, that's exactly right. So,
I don't think they do.
or they don't think they do. They have very few. They're either not categorizing them or they're actually not spending anything.
The owner's not dumping any of their salary into the P&L under sales.
Sure, exactly. So if we said, hey, we found this magical company that they have all this service revenue and they have no sales expenses, they have no G&A somehow, what would their net profit be?
Oh, no.
They have no sales expenses and no G&A.
Oh, 46.5%.
Exactly, because gross profit equals, net profit is gross profit minus expenses.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Well done. So what is the Barry McKinley target for sales expenses?
10%.
That's right.
10%.
All right. So if we said, and so what would the raw dollars be for $1 million company?
Raw dollars. 100,000.
That's right.
Are we still doing the 4 and 2? 4 for salary, 4 commission, 2
Yeah, we'll talk about that, but generally yes. But we're not super strict on that. Dollars equals 10% times 1 million equals 100,000. Okay. So if I said, hey, we found this magical company that has $465,000 worth of gross profit. Their gross profit is 46.5%. They have 10% sales expenses and no G&A. What would their net profit be?
36.5.
36.5. Drop it by 10.
Exactly. All right. Now, the G&A target
12%.
15.
Gosh.
Okay. Okay, so for this company, 15% times 1
million.
That's right. Equals how much?
150.
All right. So if I said, hey, they have a 46.5% gross profit margin, they have 10% goes towards sales expenses and 15% goes to G&A, what would their net profit be?
Oh, yeah. 21.5.
Minus 25.
So what is it?
21.5. Yeah, look at that. 6.5. Yeah. 21.5. I like these view features, Dan. Nice job.
Nice.
I love this product. I'm glad you guys switched because Zoom is just.
You love it?
The best I've ever used.
Nice.
Hey, do you? This is a question I had for you, Josh. I don't know if I sent it to you or not. Do you use the version that they provide transcription?
Oh no, I don't know. I've never looked at that.
Because there's one version of it that they offered free. It's included in the package that they transcribe all of your meetings.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll look into that because that's awesome. I would definitely like that.
I used it for a little while. Like, it gave me a 1-month demo on it, and it was pretty cool.
Outstanding.
They break up all of the channels for each of the people.
Oh.
So each of the people that have logged in, it tells them, identifies who was talking.
Oh wow, that's cool. Very cool. So if we take this, we say we found out their overall gross profit. We found out they're spending 10 and 15. That led to 21.5. That's the whole story right there, guys. That's the entire story. What your challenge is to get your clients to ask a very simple question. Why? Why am I at 21.5%? Why am I at 8%? Why am I at whatever percentage I'm at? The hard part is that when they're in their 18, 19, 20, 22%, they never ask why. They just say, hey, we have awesome net profit. Why? And what are some very easy words on this screen that could explain why? Why is this company 21.5%?
They're either getting good service revenue or good service profit or good product profit margin or bad.
That's perfect. Yeah. In this case, they have from our target to get to 15%. They're 5 points high on their gross profit for service. They're 5 points low on their product, but this 5% on the higher percentage revenue is a bigger deal than the 5% low on the lower ratio revenue.
That's right, because our service target is what, 60%?
Service target is 55.
55.
Okay. So the story becomes very obvious. Now, here's a scenario that happens quite often. And I'll think of like a great example here. There's a company called BSSI2 here in the Chicago area that their net profit is, and you might want to kind of write this down as I'm saying it because I'm going to ask you why in a moment. Their net profit is like 18%. But their sales expenses are 0%, like 1%. That's like nothing. Their service gross profit is like 48%. How are they getting that high net profit with such crappy service department gross profit?
So they're not factoring in sales.
They don't have any sales expenses. That's it. And that's exactly it. They legitimately don't have any sales expenses. Their website is probably $500 a year to host. And we could argue, yes, let's put the owner's salary in there, whatever. But for that, he has no sales expenses. So what happens, and this is why so many of these $1 million companies don't turn into $2 and $3 million companies, is that they run their service department at such a low gross profit because they don't know how to run it at a high gross profit. They don't know the actions and activities to do. So they get very low service gross profit. They don't believe in sales or they're afraid of sales. So they don't spend any sales dollars, yet they still deliver a decent gross profit or net profit. And they don't see a problem. Okay. And then one day they wake up and they say, I really have to invest in sales and marketing. I have to do it. And you start talking to them about, well, you're going to need to budget about 10% of your revenue. And their reaction, they don't use these words, but this is what they're saying is, I don't have that money. Josh, you told me I have to be at 15%. And now you tell me I have to spend 10% of my revenue on sales expenses. That'll drive my net profit down to nothing. I say, yes, it will. It's because you have not been effective and efficient in your service gross profit to deliver you 20%, 25%, 30% net profit in the absence of that sales expense.
Yeah, so if they don't have sales expense currently, their net profit should be far in excess of 15% if they're doing it right.
That's exactly right. They should be 46.5 minus 15. They should be in the low 30s all day long. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like in 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, maybe 9, 10, 11, when you would meet these people who were not paying their mortgage because they couldn't afford to. So suddenly their household profit was going up $1,500, $2,000, $2,500, $3,000, $3,500 a month because they didn't have a housing expense.
Default.
So that family that made $100,000, suddenly that $3,000 a month, that's $36,000. They had an extra $36,000 a year to go on vacation and buy stupid cars and do these things because they didn't have a housing expense. But once they finally got foreclosed on, now what do? I can't afford $3,000 a month. I can't afford $2,500 a month. The bank won't give me a loan because instead of taking that $3,000 a month that we're spending on housing and saving it, they blew it somewhere else. So it's the same thing that happens in these MSPs is I got over on the system. I grew without sales expense. And now it's time for me to try to grow some more. And what I did to get to $1 million won't be the same thing that gets me to 2 or 3. And I simply don't have the money because I was really sloppy on delivering service gross profit.
And they just raised their cost of living. They've just been, yeah, I got you.
Dan, does this story make sense?
Yeah, they were basically burning money in the wrong place.
Yeah.
They had more money to burn than they actually did.
Right. They didn't feel the pressures, the economic or financial pressures to tighten up their service department and have a high degree of accountability.
Yeah.
So,
and from this, what this exercise we're doing here, what I would have seen, one of the things that would have caught my eye here is they're not paying their people enough. Well, they could potentially not be paying their people enough because our target is 55% gross and we get 60. So we're 5% above target of gross profit on service. That could be another issue that they're underpaying their people, which puts them at risk on their staff. It's another thing that would pop out in my head from the service side.
So that would be one of your hypotheses that you would want to try or to prove or disprove. I would definitely have the same thought. I might also think to myself, you're $1 million company, which is a nice milestone, but the owner's probably doing a lot. And maybe even the owner's wife is doing a lot. But the owner's doing a lot. He's probably doing a lot of service in absence of having a dispatcher, a service manager, or another tech. Because he's doing that, he's so busy, he doesn't have time to think about how to do sales. So now he's in this real conundrum because he's used to living off of $150,000 a year.
Not to mention when you went to meet him, he came driving up in a Rollie in his parking garage in the city.
Yep. Yeah. All hat and no cattle. Right? And it's such a common place.
All hat and no cattle. I love that.
Yeah, right. So it's such a common spot for people to be in.
Yeah.
And it may not be the Rollie, it might be the shitty Christian private school they decided to send their kids to.
Yeah.
It may have been something else that it's like, hey, I make $1 million. I should make $100,000 a year. I'm making 150, but that extra 50 is what's robbing from my ability to put it into sales expenses, and the fact that I'm missing every weekend event and I'm working until 3 a.m. 3 times a week because I haven't allocated properly in my service department. Or I could be a real cheapskate and hire really low-level techs or underpay people and everyone's stressed out. Could be that as well. So you start developing these hypotheses in your head. And being a consultant means having the ideas and silently proving and disproving them to a diagnosis. Just like the doctor doesn't look at your blood work and say, you have hepatitis, because that blood work is right there is messed up. It's, what could it be? Did you have a fever recently? Were you sick recently? You know, you're not eating enough iron. Like, they got to kind of work through it to find the right diagnosis and the right treatment plan.
Does it burn when you pee? You get a little burn there.
Right. That's awesome. That's exactly, yeah. It's all you figuring out what the story means. Or, you know, you can listen to the story with this information. Knowing what the story meant is the next tricky part.
Cool.
So with this information, what I would do you guys know what like a what I would do if I'm you is I would nerd out with a big stack of paper and say, $2 million company, 30/20 or 30/70. What's their service to salary, or service to product revenue? And I would just do that exercise 50 times, making up, you know, $1.7 million company, $800 million company, $20 million company, $100,000 company, and just get familiar with the ratios, and then go through that gross profit exercise, and then get into that. Okay, here's when product is really high as a percentage and really low gross profit, and service is a very low percentage of revenue with a really high gross profit. What did the overall gross profit look like? And you can start drawing these correlations. So one of the things that we tell people, and we get in our chops busted a little bit, is Barry McKinley says we love a 60% service and a 40% product. Our P&L is based off of that. But it's also based off of getting 55% gross profit on service and 20% gross profit on product. If you cannot get 20% gross profit, I do not want your product revenue to represent 40% of your revenue. If you can only get 10% gross profit, you damn well better bring that ratio down to about 10 or 15% product to service ratio. You understand?
Nope.
So when we give the Barry McKinley targets, they're all based on us doing the math of saying ratio, gross profit, sales expenses, G&A. If we plug the Barry McKinley numbers here, it leads to 16% net profit. I can't get married to you're not selling enough product. I can't say that to somebody without understanding how that flows. And
What's our target on product? GP?
20%.
20. Okay.
That all makes sense. Conversely, if someone's crushing it on, they've got crazy deal regs or relationships with vendors, if they're crushing it on product GP, they make it 35 points, and we don't hold to that. Would we be a stickler about the 40%?
Not necessarily, but what we would say is service, service is always going to have a higher gross profit. Service is where your real money gets made. You getting 35% GP on that 40% of product that you're selling, I love it. It takes a little bit of pressure off your service GP if you struggle there, but no matter what, you're going to bang into 47, 48% here.
So the whole
If
point of
they're
having
a
that,
good box, no, go ahead.
so the whole point of having that 40-60 split is just diversification.
Diversification, yeah, absolutely. And an acknowledgement that, so one of the reasons we put so much pressure on there being a lot of product sales or product revenue is because if I don't see product revenue above 10, 15% on your P&L, I know exactly what's happening. You're not selling new things to existing clients, and you're not selling new things to new clients. Product is my canary in the cavern test.
What about when that question comes up of all my stuff is in the cloud? So I don't sell servers. I mean, servers are huge margins. I don't have to sell the components to servers. I don't sell backup hardware. I don't sell all this crap that would be on site. Which, I mean, that's basically what happened with my company, slowly but surely. We used to have we were selling $2 and $3 million of product a year, and that's not what we considered our bread and butter.
Exactly.
It was just servers and just massive amounts of hardware with nice juicy target profit margins. And then as hosted services started popping up and becoming not only the buzzword, but also becoming the gold standard of where you want your servers to be is off-site.
Yep. So that's a phenomenal question. We're seeing it in servers. We're seeing it in Office 365. We're seeing it in backups. We're seeing it in, there's another layer on there as well.
BYOD, bring your own device.
That kind of stuff as well. What we know is that there is a downward pressure on the amount of product people are buying. We also know that right now, I said there's two types of revenue. What are those again?
Service.
And?
Product.
Right. So what I'm working on for the last about 14 months, and I have to have something done by November of this year. After November this year, you're going to see that Barry McKinley says there's three kinds of service or three kinds of revenue.
Managed service.
Product, service, resold cloud service.
That's what I always considered managed services. Anything that was a resold software through the cloud, resold hardware, all that stuff was where we put that. Managed services was a.
So here's where that's a good idea, and here's where that makes it challenging.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, all we talked about was you have to have a profit margin of 55% for service. Managed service is one of the types of service revenue. If I put that $3,000 or, let's say $2,000 of managed services revenue that was, one client being built up of their, Azure or Amazon or Office 365 or whatever it is, well, that stuff is very low margin, 3 to 16%. So what happens is you've increased your service revenue with very low margin items so that when I do one of the most important calculations of service salaries to service revenue, I'm taking the service salaries and dividing it into that inflated service revenue, which is going to lower the service revenue ratio from 33 down to 28, 29%. And then you're going to say, I'm doing good. Oh, but wait a minute. There's $20,000 worth of managed services revenue that's all resold cloud services that I only made 13% on. So the debate that your clients have with themselves, with each other, with us is, where should I put that Office 365? Where should I put that Amazon? Where should I put that Datto? And today we're telling you to do exactly what you just said, Dan. Put it under service revenue, okay? Or put it under product revenue. Either way, you're going to skew your margins from the traditional revenue of service and product.
So what you're basically looking for is for the owner to be able to have an intelligent conversation about how they're breaking it up and why.
Consistency, yeah. If you're going to put it under product, put it under product revenue and product COGS. If you're going to put it under service, keep the COG with the revenue. what we were seeing a lot of people doing is their bookkeeper didn't quite understand because the owner didn't quite understand. So the bookkeeper would take that big Microsoft bill and put it under G&A under subscriptions, or they put it under product, but they put the revenue under service or some variation of that. So their P&Ls were getting really messy. So we will have a third revenue type called resold cloud services. But as you can see, I need to be able to tell the story of what's the ratio, what's the gross profit, in order to maintain the overall gross profit that supports the sales and G&A and still allows you enough net profit.
But it's not just some haphazard figure you can throw out. It's got to be
right. Yeah, you have to really tell the story, because when people hear you talk about these numbers, they will start saying, well, Dan wants me to have 30% of my revenue in product. Ben wants me to have 30% of my revenue in product. That's not a wrong statement, but it's a really misleading statement. They start assigning this target to Barry McKinley wants me to have this. Barry McKinley says it should be this.
Yeah.
And we have to gently correct them that it's like, I don't care what your ratio is. And this is why we sometimes don't argue with people around how they do their product and how they do their service calculations. We just say, you owe me 42% overall gross profit, because I need to be able to take 25% out for sales and G&A and still have 15, 16, 17% left over.
So our product GP margin or product GP percentage target is 42%.
Our product GP target is 20%. Oh, our overall gross profit margin? Yeah. So you tell me what our target is. If I need 15% net profit, I can spend 15 on G&A and 10 on sales expenses. What's 10 plus 15 plus 15?
30, 40.
40. That's our target.
Okay.
You have to deliver me 40%. Hey.
And this is company specific, Ben, based on what they're actually spending, or this is what we want those. We want G&A at 15%, sales at 10. So 40% is what we're looking for. Okay.
Yeah, we want those so that you can have something to shoot for. That's why we say target instead of benchmark.
Yeah.
Benchmark's a bullshit number. If I call this a benchmark, you're going to run to the benchmark, and if you're not in compliance, you're going to feel you're wrong, and you're never really going to understand that the benchmark is part of an equation. So if you want 15% net profit, then I'm going to give you a target of 40%, 10, and 15. So this piece right here, this is my legacy. This is my goal. This is my, like, holy shit, I'm blowing minds with this because people finally get it. Because we can, the only reason we talk about service GP in terms of service salaries to service revenue, service COGS, what ratio of project, hourly, and recurring, giving them targets for that. The only reason we go into that information is to say, hey, here's how you can structure your service department to make sure you get 55%. But I don't care if you get 55%. I don't care if you get 20%. Motherfucker, you owe me 40% here.
Yeah.
However you want to do it is up to you.
Now, when you do the, I mean, I don't remember. I think I remember some of the courses that I sat in, the team groups that you had, the group meetings.
Yeah.
That you have on site.
Yeah.
How much would you say percentage of those attendees have an issue with the monthly, looking myopically at monthly versus looking at long term? And they might see a kind of an up and down in their hardware sales. Obviously, I mean, it's easy to come to that conclusion, but at least from what I saw in the beginning, some of them get freaked out. Why is is it bad that I've got this kind of up and down from, every quarter, from this quarter was this or this month was that, and not looking at things long term?
Yeah, they say that, in the United States, businesses look quarter to quarter. In China, they look decade to decade.
Jesus.
So we look at things on a monthly and quarterly basis in the way that we say that just keeps you accountable to the knowledge. I don't expect you to make huge course swings and corrections every month, but what I expect you to do is say, why was it down? Oh, it was down because I had to pay big bonuses this month, or it was down because my sales guy was sick and he didn't sell as much. You don't have to make a big swinging correction in your strategy, but you better know. It's kind of like, I'm a fat guy, so I live this thing where it's, if I don't weigh myself every day, suddenly I wake up, 2 months later having gained 10 or 15 pounds. So I have to weigh myself every day to stay on, from going crazy. Someone else who doesn't have that problem says, oh, you shouldn't weigh yourself every day. It swings. It has all this stuff. It's like, that's right. I agree. But if I don't, I'm going to go nuts. So when they look at this month to month, sometimes they go a little crazy, like, what the hell? Oh my God, I'm awful. But for most people, it's look at it, measure it, understand it, keep doing what you're doing. Or if you did something really wacky, correct it. Does that answer your question? All right. So this is the story right here. So I would encourage you to just practice, practice, practice. I'm going to show you a spreadsheet here that I've made for our clients. And this is a way that you can practice this because I've already done the math for you. All right, so in the green, you type in the green. You don't type in the red. Okay. And I won't pretend this thing is like amazing and beautiful and all that. It's kind of the best.
Well, and I'm colorblind, so they all look the same.
Oh, that's right.
I'm just kidding. They don't look the same.
They look different, but red and green.
So many people ask me that too. They go, so do these look the same? It's like, no. I'm like, I don't see monochrome. I can tell different shades.
Right. So what we can see here is on this column O, all of these numbers come from the P&L.
Well, I can't see this whole thing. Let me see if I can get my zoom down.
Okay. So 1 through 35 is all about the P&L. 36 to 40 is all about the balance sheet. 41 to 44 is all about HR numbers. And 45 to 49 is information you get out of the PSA. Okay.
Yeah.
So if we were going to play with this, we said, hey, I'm just making up numbers. This is just one client would say, oh, they had $80,000 worth of product revenue in January, and it cost them $65,000. Product GP was 18.8%. And their recurring revenue is $100,000 a month. And their hourly is $15,000. Oh, sorry, I just screwed up and typed in the red. All right. Their hourly is $15,000. And see, I screwed up the
I hate that. The
formula. All right. And their project was, they had $60,000 a month of projects. Okay, let me just fix this formula real quick. So their total service revenue was what? Total service revenue. Service revenue was 175,000. Okay, so let me just fix this formula real quick. It equals that divided by that. Okay, so 57, 88.6, and 34.3 equals 100%. So those are their different service revenues. Their service salaries, let's say they pay, $30,000 in service salaries. That would be extremely low. All right. And their other service COGS, they've got, $22,000 worth of stuff. Well, now I've got all my stuff. I've got my percentages of service revenue. I have my total service revenue. I have my service salaries at 30,000. So my service salary service revenue was 17.1%. So my service GP was 70%. Okay, and I can see that my 30% of my revenue came from products, 70% came from service. My overall gross profit is 54%.
They must be using volunteers in their
They
service.
must be using volunteers. So Ben, that's a really good point. A lot of times when I'm working with somebody through their assessment or just getting to know them or go through this exercise with them, they will have this weird, like 54%. That's basic. Anything over 50% is impossible. It's just impossible if you're looking at product and service. So just as you honed in on, oh, you must be using volunteers, what you might conclude is, I wonder if you have some of these service salaries in your general and administrative expenses. I wonder if you've made that error. And they say, well, no, but I put my dispatcher under admin. And you're like, your dispatcher, how much do they make? It's 40,000. Okay, cool. So it's actually 33,500. Well, that makes a lot more. That's getting closer. And then they say, and I have a tech who's also my sales guy. Oh, okay. Well, he makes 100,000. Great. Your service salaries are actually 37,500. We'll take half of that. And now it starts getting in line.
Question for you about ownership draws. Does this was always a conflict between me and my peers at my company, was the effect of draws on net profit. Being to them, it was inconsequential. I was supposed to ignore it.
What's a draw? What does that mean?
Ownership draw from the balance sheet, basically taking that was instead of taking a salary, or in addition to taking a salary, they would take cash out of the company for their own personal draw.
Is it recoverable or no?
Well, this is the owners.
Oh, so non-recoverable.
So by draw, he means distribution.
Yeah.
Oh.
Right. All right. So here's how that works, Dan. So there's three things at play. One of them is when they take that distribution, that money's coming off the balance sheet, so it doesn't affect the P&L. Okay, so it doesn't hit any of these expense or COG categories. Where it starts getting screwed up is if you say it's $1 million company or $2 million company, and the owner doesn't pay himself any sort of salary, they would have to be categorized as service COG, sales expense, or G&A expense. He just pays himself on distribution. You get this inflated profitability if they're participating in the business. Okay, so if he's doing most of his work is as sales work,
right?
Hey, you have no sales expenses when really you do. But as an employee who's maybe in profit sharing or something like that, hell, what he does with his draws doesn't impact you at all. Where it impacts you is if he instead says, I don't take any draws. I just pay myself $200,000 a year or $300,000 a year off of the P&L. Well, somewhere it's going to make the profitability of the company look lower.
What's the incentive of an owner to take a draw versus paying themselves a flat salary?
It has to do with how the IRS taxes that. If I pay myself $100,000 a year purely on payroll or on the P&L, I have to pay state and local taxes on that money, and I have to pay about 7.5% towards Social Security. If I take it as a draw, I don't pay that 7.5% Social Security. Right? You understand what I'm saying, Ben?
Yeah.
So what owners will do is they'll say, I take a mix. I pay myself a reasonable salary of $70,000, and I pay the rest of my compensation off of a draw, so I save myself that 7.5%.
Nice. Good loophole.
Yeah, it's a good loophole. So that's why the IRS has that phrase in there that says a reasonable salary.
Yeah.
And every owner has gone through that struggle to say, well, what's a reasonable salary? The IRS intentionally does not have a chart for you.
Well, and then they also can take that part of that draw. If they dump part of that draw into another investment vehicle. that looks better in the eyes of IRS and when you're doing your taxes.
Yeah, lots of variables in there for sure. All right, so as you type into this green, you begin to see the story. Our service COGS were 34%. Our service salaries to service revenue ratio was 21%, which still seems really low. But our service GP was 66%. And so our our gross profit for product and services was 225,000. I'm sorry, that was our total revenue. That was our gross profit from both. So we had that overall GP of 51.2%. Then if we said, hey, this is a really aggressive company, they spend, about $180,000. Let's see, $18,000 a month on sales expenses, and they spend, $20,000 on G&A. Their net profit is 36%. These are pretty low. These are low numbers relative to their ratio. Okay. And so he has this really high net profit. This would be a dream. It's not very practical, but this would be a dream to have $92,000 worth of net profit off of $255,000 of revenue. So if you were looking at your client's P&L, you could say, hey, send me a copy of your P&L, and you could type their numbers into this spreadsheet and come up with the actual number.
I might actually do that as with some of my clients, just a test to get more familiar.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And also, is there a restriction on who gets this shared with them versus another client?
No, we send this spreadsheet to all of our clients.
Okay, so they don't have to be signed up for Compass or anything like that.
No, you can share this all day long. So every month, our clients get what's called an executive briefing, and it's basically all of this stuff, but it's from the financial dashboard, and it does all this math for them and just presents it in a really clean way that they can see.
How is that working, by the way, now?
I would give it about a B- right now. We still struggle with people getting their numbers updated in time for the report to run. But the math is accurate and it's there. Is it accepting those?
I mean, every once in a while, the clients would come in and say, hey, how are you doing on this? I'm doing the uploads. Oh, the last 6 months, it didn't work. And they didn't bother to tell you it didn't work. They just they're 6 months behind on getting their stuff uploaded, so they don't know what they know.
Right. Typically, they're lying. What it means is, I tried it in January, it failed, and I didn't try again, and now I'm sitting here with my peer team, and I'm going to say it didn't work. Where it's like, okay, cool, you got to reinstall the engine, the Intuit web connector, and then boom, it magically works again. So yeah, we still face a fair amount of that. It's just crazy to me that people don't get as excited about these numbers as they should.
Yeah.
Because even if they're really messed up and it's really out of whack, knowing that allows you to take action.
Yeah, I mean, I look back on especially my last 7 years at my company where I started getting really pushed into the financials.
Yeah.
I wish I had this information. And I was looking at things in this information because it would have given me a whole lot more working leverage as to what I was doing in the service department, let alone the company's health.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So this is what we're really focusing on with the clients right now is know your overall gross profit. If you're under 41, 42%, you're probably in trouble because people don't really deliver 15% G&A. They're usually like 18, 19, 22, 21. Well, each point over 15, you better have on your gross profit if you want to maintain 15% net profit.
Where do you see the vast majority of companies falling with that added expense in G&A? What is it? Just overpriced admin? What are they typically? Is there kind of a Something you see a lot?
You know, office expense a lot of times.
Do they lump any of their personal stuff under that?
There's some of that, and we asked them to recast that out, get that out of there. So that's a big one, is owner's discretionary spending. If I was going to name one spot that's traditionally overpaid, it's office expense. They want a nicer office than what they can truly afford. But here's the reality too. Under about 1.5 or $1 million, it is hard to keep your expenses down to 15%. Once you get to 3 million, 4 million, 5 million,
Yeah,
you're spending the same dollars. What's that, Dan?
You scaled into a point where you utilize your space much more effectively.
Right, exactly. I don't need to, if I double my revenue, I don't likely need to double my office size. I don't really need to hire another bookkeeper. I don't need another copy of QuickBooks. I don't need, twice the amount of postage. I don't need twice the electric bill.
Growing into those shoes.
Growing into those shoes, absolutely. So we don't bust balls too hard on, $1 million company spending 20% on G&A, as we know it's hard. But all it takes is one or two guys doing it, and you say, well, how can he do it and you can't? Right? That's kind of the big trick. Like Barry McKinley, we spend like 13%, maybe 12%. And even that's a little bit high, but we've got some expensive tools.
Hey, do we have a different address, by the way?
We do, yeah. I moved, so we have a different address now.
You moved.
I did.
Changing, Dan.
Yeah, the world has blasted by you in the last year.
Did you move into a giant mansion?
A giant mansion.
Yes.
It was truly a giant mansion.
Or did you move right next to the airport?
I wish I moved right next to the airport. I just moved back into Lisle, but you moved. What was it? Is that a year now?
Yeah, it's been a little bit over a year.
And have you been renting that your old place out?
We're renting my wife's old place out, and we're renting the upstairs of this place.
Cool. That's
Nice.
awesome.
I gotta take a bio break, folks.
Yeah, let's take 10 or 15, and we'll come back and we'll do some more exercises here.
Cool.
And just I've got a hard stop right after this. So
Okay, cool. Yeah, we won't be too much longer today.
yeah, I just
Cool.
need 5 minutes.
All right.
Anyone back?
Yo.
Yo.
So, do you still regularly keep up with your jujitsu stuff? Like, do a lot of training still? And
I trained 5 times this week.
oh shit, okay, yes, you do.
Yeah.
Cool.
I do it. That is, I think it's safe to say that is a passion of mine for sure.
That's awesome. How long have you been doing it?
10 years, going on 11.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I was a grappler in high school, so I was a wrestler.
Okay.
And it just lends itself really well to doing that. Something I've kind of kept with.
Do you compete at all, or you pretty much just do it for?
Right now, I just do it. Just do the classes, and we grapple. So I'll do. Let's see here. This week, for example, after every class, so it's a class is typically from 7 to 8:30, and you'll do an hour of technique, and then you'll roll or just grapple with the other students for a half hour, and that's
Okay.
just. I mean, it's not competing, but it's like I mean, you're going hard. So I'll do
Sparring.
that. So we did that on Monday, Tuesday. Didn't do it on Wednesday. Last night we did. It was nothing but rolling for an hour and a half. So that was pretty. But that was no gi. And then this morning was just technique. So normally, if I'm not traveling, I'm going to the beach this weekend. Saturday morning, we've got a bit of a, I guess for lack of a better word, a fight club where from 8 to 10 in the morning where we go and just throw on some heavy metal or hardcore rap and just get after it. But
you
no,
don't. You don't go to injure, do you?
What's that?
You don't go to injure, separating any joints and things like that.
No, it's all. I mean, it's training smart. So if the onus is on you to keep yourself from getting injured. So if you don't, when we roll, people are trying to tap you, and vice versa. So, if for example, Monday was rolling with a black belt and he caught a good arm bar on me. If I didn't tap, I would have gotten injured.
Okay.
So the onus is not if the onus is on the person that gets caught to tap. Otherwise, there's no telling whether or not their partner will see the chance to stop or no. It's just not their responsibility. So, but yeah, you try to take care of your training partners for sure. Oh, and so that was a very long-winded answer. I haven't competed in.
I was just curious how brutal it gets. I tried to start getting into kung fu. This was way back when I was early in my company. So it's 20 years ago, I think. And I wish I had stuck with it because it was even in the beginning, there was some of the best workouts.
Oh yeah.
In an hour, I mean, they just you walk out and you're just like, Jesus, do I have to go back tomorrow?
It's one. Yeah, I
Back
find
in 2
myself.
days.
There's been multiple times where I've not wanted to train, but after I walked out, I was very happy I did. Is this?
Have you ever seen this?
Yeah.
Dick jerky moves on the mats. I don't know if he shows any actually. I've watched this video like mean things you can do. Like one of them they showed was like this grabbing the guy's chin and just cranking his neck.
There's a definite there's some sleazy techniques in there.
Yeah.
Sure. The guy that I train with, the professor that I train with, he's a first degree black belt. He's he's not known for doing dirty stuff, but he's known for doing like street not give a shit type stuff, like just straight up wrist locks, real quick, and stuff that most of the refined community would say, oh, the wrist lock is cheating. And he's like, fuck that. I break your wrist, you ain't doing shit. It's like,
I did see some videos of people like being in a weird guard and then somebody just grabbing the wrist and doing that real quick. It's like,
it's awesome.
Yeah,
I'm all about, I go straight to the smallest joints on whoever I'm rolling with. So it's either your ankles or your wrists or your neck.
Brutal.
But effective. But long-winded answer for Dan. Dan, I haven't competed in probably going on 2 years now. So only done about 7 or 8 total. I just go to the class and I roll, and that's primarily it.
So you're not going to do the Las Vegas one, Ben?
No.
All right. Well, we'll miss.
I'm training. I'm technically training quite a bit, but it's just I have such little desire to actually compete in it. I don't know.
Yeah.
In particular, though, I'd have to go. I would want to do like a camp for it or something. So.
When does age start catching up to you with jiu-jitsu?
Already has.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like it's one of those things you just have to train smarter. But I think it helps. I think it helps keep age in check. But you'll definitely. I mean, my cardio is not what it was when I was 25. It's well, no, I take that back. It's actually pretty damn good. Yeah, I don't have a. Has it caught it? I mean, there's a couple times when you're rolling. If you get a young, say D1 wrestler that comes in, and you roll with them, you'll know real quick that they're a D1 wrestler, and you'll be like, and you'll think in the back of your mind, shit, why the hell am I rolling this guy? But and that's a bit of an age thing. But other than that, I think the sport itself, if you train enough, I think a lot of the older people use their age as an excuse. So. Didn't really answer your question. But.
It's like tennis in a very small way, where it's like the older tennis player knows how to, stay more stationary and place that ball in tough spots. Where the younger player is all about, I can get anywhere, anytime, and they're gonna fry themselves.
If to apply that to jiu-jitsu, I've almost got like almost like a sluggish style where I just kind of. I move slowly until I know my opening, and then I explode. I use my energy very conservatively, and then when I go. But everyone watching me roll at certain points would probably call it a sloth style or something. But then just moving around, being very very strategic, and I think a lot of older guys do that, or gals, and then use your energy restrictively, and then when it's time to grab that opening, you blast.
Yeah.
you ever thought expanding into like Brazilian jiu-jitsu and going into some of that acrobatic stuff?
Oh, you're talking about, so what I do is Brazilian jiu-jitsu. You're talking about capoeira?
Yeah, okay. That sounds good.
the like dancing with the kicks.
Yeah,
that's capoeira. That's not jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
What I do is the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and that's all ground for the most part. It's judo and wrestling takedowns from stand-up, and then on the ground is where the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu really thrives. So
awesome.
There you go.
Awesome. All right, boys, let's do this. let us talk a little bit about, oh, I just lost it.
Definitions?
Well, the definitions, but there was one other thing I wanted to show you first. Well, we'll go to the definitions. Okay. So this is just a thing I'm building, which talks about like the key metrics that Barry McKinley pays attention to. So I'm going to send this out to you guys, but this is like version 1. I have somebody working on a pretty version that's a little more helpful.
You put that on Teams?
Not yet. Not yet. This is kind of a working draft, but I will put it on Teams.
Yeah, just under that training.
Yeah. So as you kind of work your way through knowing all of this, oh, here's what it was that I want to talk to you about. So there's 2 ways that a P&L can be reported. It's 2 different bases of accounting. Does that ring a bell on what the 2 bases are?
Yeah, it's a cash flow or the delayed one. It's like
Yeah, you're on point. Dan, does this ring a bell with you?
deferred, deferred revenue, something like that.
Cash and accrual.
Okay, cash and accrual. Cash on hand, working as what's in house, off of what's in house, and versus working on what's outstanding.
See you guys.
See you. Love you.
Love you too. Yes. Hey, Fletch.
Yeah.
Come here real quick.
Yeah.
Tell me when to go live.
Yeah, he'll be. Fletch.
Yeah.
You got.
Hey.
Oh my God.
Will you do one, please?
Yay! I think one more upstairs to that.
What is that? What is that? Am I getting sold that I have no idea what that means?
It's a goofy thing that Fletchy and Ben do, where they do this little singing note. That's bye, guys.
Range. He's doing it. I have to emulate it every time I see him.
That's right. All right. So yeah, Dan, you guys are both definitely on the right track here. So when we run a P&L, it's either going to be in cash basis or accrual basis. So before you go to sleep tonight, just say cash accrual 100 times, just so you get the words right. What might happen is I might look at your P&L and it's in cash basis, and you might be looking at an accrual basis, and the numbers are different. So what accrual basis means is I'm reporting revenue as I send the invoice to the client. So I send you an invoice today for $100. My books are now going to reflect $100 of revenue. In cash basis, if I send that invoice to you today for $100, nothing shows up on my P&L. It shows up when I receive your payment for that $100 in cash basis. You understand the difference?
What do we run at Barry McKinley?
Well, let me answer that in 1 minute, okay?
Yeah, sure.
So the similar is true on an expense or a cost of goods sold. If you send me an invoice for $100, in accrual basis, when I enter that invoice as something I owe you, in accrual basis, that event happened right now, so it shows $100. If I do it on cash basis, I'll enter that invoice and nothing will happen until I trigger the payment to you.
So in an accrual basis, it's one of the rationale to try to get an accounting person to post their owed bills when they come in. In other words, when you get your invoices from your vendors, get them in your system, or accrual is going to be off. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And we could go on a whole nother chain there. So let's try to answer Ben's question in a little different way. What does the IRS want? What would a taxing authority or the IRS want you to report your revenue and profits on? Accrual or cash?
Cash.
Cash.
Cash just sounds more realistic because if you, but I'm going to say after I saw your facial expression, accrual.
I didn't know it's that obvious. The IRS would love everyone to report on accrual basis
Yeah.
because that means they're going to get paid quicker.
Yeah.
If I send you a bunch of invoices on December 31st, I don't have to pay taxes on that if I were to file in cash basis.
Mm.
In accrual basis, if I filed an accrual basis, I don't have to pay for that. Or in accrual basis, I have to pay for that right now
Gotcha.
because
Yeah,
it hasn't happened. But since I'm not,
sorry.
yeah. So if I file in cash, hey, I sent out $100,000 worth of invoices. I didn't get that money yet, so I'm not
That's what
paying
I think
it.
about as being a big headache for companies is, inaccurate invoices, slow payers. If you're doing accrual basis, you have to factor all that. All that crap's going to affect it. But cash is just kind of cash in, cash out. It seems like a better method. Is that true or?
So better is probably a fair word. What we would say is Barry McKinley we only look at people's financials on an accrual basis because that reflects the events happening as they happen. So I don't care about how quickly you get paid or you pay your bill. When did the event occur? Because that tells me about the operations.
Okay.
If I do it on cash basis and your clients, pay very sporadically and strangely, I'm going to be looking at these weird swings that have more to do with your clients paying than about when things actually occurred. So what our clients do is they file their taxes on a cash basis, but they look at them from a business standpoint in accrual basis.
Now, would there be advantages to do one or the other, or if you even could do it from year to year on a different basis without having a red flag show up on the IRS because of your state of your accounts? If you owe a lot of money and you've got a lot of money due into you, go cash because you look smaller?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, and the IRS basically says the first time you do your taxes for that entity, that is what it is.
Wow.
You can only change, I believe it's every 3 years.
So you file in cash.
Yeah, so you're filing cash, and then suddenly you're like, oh, I want to do accrual. I don't think you can just switch on 1 year. There's very specific rules. Let me just leave it at that. There's specific rules on how you can switch your reporting basis. Now, here's the goofy stuff that your clients will talk about that you'll want to kind of be aware or cognizant of. I can't remember if it was Wisconsin or Michigan, but one of them requires all taxes to be filed quarterly on an accrual basis.
Oh,
That's some bullshit.
yeah.
Like, what does that tell you about that government is they're strapped for cash.
Yeah.
They want to get paid quicker. It has nothing to do with fair, reasonable, theoretical, academic. It's we're broke. We want the money quicker. There's no other fucking way to look at that. I want my money when you quote unquote earned it, not when you received it. So it's some real bullshit.
Yeah,
But it is what it is. If your client tells you about that, if you say, hey, we have to file, hey, we look at them in accrual basis, and they're like, trying to tell you a story about, what they're doing, you have to be able to follow that story to some degree. So knowing the difference between accrual and cash. Now, there's a real easy formula. So if we said the profit in an accrual-based P&L versus the profit of a cash-based P&L is equal to the sum of the accounts receivable and the accounts payable, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a real simple, there's a very easy delta between the two to understand. You'll never have to do that math. You'll never have to, prove that. It's just the mathematics of a P&L is one accounts for accounts receivable and accounts payable, one does not. Okay, so we file in cash, we report an accrual. So the Barry McKinley financial dashboard is set to read their QuickBooks from an accrual basis.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. So the definitions, these are just kind of like, this is what makes Barry McKinley tick. These are the things that, you know, if you were going to work with a new client, you'd be saying, hey, I want to know all of these items on a rolling basis so I can see how their progress is, how they're doing, what's important to know. Just like if you were training an athlete, you would want to say, what did you eat? How much protein? How much fat? How much carbs? How much cardio did you do? What are you benching? What is your 40-meter run? What's your mile run? What's your vertical? You would want to know all this thing about the athlete. You'd want to know how it's changing over time, right? And then you would be able to listen to that story and say, you're performing better here. Oh, it's because you're doing more of that, or you're eating better here. You as a trainer would know the story.
Gotcha.
That's what knowing these numbers does for you. And what we say, and this is a really important thing to consider, when your comfort level starts rising in being able to understand what you're looking at, you must acknowledge that no single target or number or KPI is conclusive of anything. Okay, just like when you go to the doctor and they take your pulse, they say, wow, your pulse is, 50 beats per minute resting. You are amazingly healthy. Like, oh, well, we didn't factor in the part, we didn't look at his cholesterol, it's through the roof. Oh, we didn't look at the fact that his, back is completely thrashed. So just like here, we could say, oh, your agreement gross profit is 65%, outstanding. Oh, but his effective hourly rate is $93 an hour. And his service salary service revenue ratio is completely off. You got to look at the whole story to come up with your diagnosis and to apply what solution you're going to put in place to it.
Sweet.
All right. Is this getting you somewhere, Dan?
Yes, this is going to be very helpful. And just reading through some definitions right here. A lot of the reminders and things that quickly fade from my brain enough where it's on the tip of my tongue, and I go da 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 da. Ask Josh.
Right. Ben, is this getting you caught back up to some things we were talking about?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
You will put this under sales training. Okay, I just want to start diving into this stuff.
Absolutely. All right, so I don't want to fry our brains too much. We're about 7 minutes to the top of the hour. Is there anything specifically that you would like to kind of talk about or dive into or understand better at this time? Or any questions about anything we talked about so far?
The only thing I still need to visit with more brain saturation is the hourly billable rates, billable utilization, those areas of stuff, because those are things that are often come up with service groups, is figuring out where that part, where and if they're bleeding on billable rates and their people and stat, because that's their biggest expense typically in any service department is their people.
Yep, absolutely.
And I would just say those like case studies that you'll throw out with anomalies in that set of numbers, and then trying to figure out what caused the anomaly or what deficiency they have is always very helpful. The case studies.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, let's do one last formula here, and that might get our brains set up for the next time we meet as well. So we're going to talk about a formula called billable service revenue, and it is utilization times rate times hours. Okay, so let's do this. Let's say that somebody has 75% utilization and they had a rate of $150 an hour, and they work 2,080 hours a year. The BSR is that time.
That's our target, right? 75%.
What's that?
Don't we want service folks being 75% utilized?
We sure do. All right, let's go here. All right, so it's that. Sorry, I'm getting messy here. Times that. Okay. That is $234,000. So what this tells you is if somebody is 75% utilized, billed at $150 an hour, and they're full-time employee at 2,080 hours, that tech can deliver $234,000 a year of revenue. Okay? That's the ideal. That's where we should be. But now we have to look and say, well, why $150 an hour? And that's where we come up with our hourly rate. And what we're looking for here is our cost times some sort of burden. Okay, and then that's rate. So we said if we pay somebody $60,000 a year, well, their hourly rate is, or their hourly wage is 60,000 divided by 2080. They're $28.84 an hour, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We just talked about payroll taxes, and those usually run around 10 to 15%, depending on the state, with Social Security and everything. Okay. So we usually put a burden rate of about 10%, about 12%, 10%. So the true cost of this individual, actually, let's go 1.12, is their cost, which is what they get paid, times the burden. They cost us $32.31 an hour. Okay, but now we have to put a multiplier on it. So our cost is $32 an hour. Barry McKinley says you have to have a 4.5 multiplier on it. You got to multiply that by 4.5 in order for you to price it correctly. All right, so that equals this times this. Oh, I shouldn't put it there. Let's escape out of this. Sorry, guys. Equals this times this. We have to charge that person at $145 an hour, right, in order to maintain profit.
And what was the 4.5 again?
Yeah, well, great question. So let's do some logic here. Let's forget about the 0.5 for a minute. Let's pretend that it was just 4. Well, we're only asking for 75% utilization, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times people talk about, oh God, hold on, guys. I think my next meeting is about to start. Let me just check here. Yep, I got to go in 1 minute, guys. I'm sorry. Shit, yeah. I had something right after this. 4.5 is simply saying, or 4.5x is saying, I got to account for only getting 75% of the time available in an actual billing environment. So that takes it from a 3x to a 4x, and the extra 0.5 is for the fact that we're going to make mistakes and we're going to discount.
Okay.
Okay. So guys, I have to do a hard stop on this because this call was I missed the other day. So
can you throw that into that other document too?
I will do that for sure, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.